Welcome to Your Bookkeeping Matters. I'm Lisa Turner, bringing you short and snackable weekly episodes on bookkeeping and business matters in an easy to understand way so you can be in control and confident that you know your bookkeeping matters. Let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, my friend. It is time for the next installment of Your Bookkeeping Matters. Thanks for tuning in. I am so glad to have you here. I've said it many times. Doing this podcast is one of my favorite things to do in my business now. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, I shared where all the topics for the upcoming episodes are coming from. You, the small business owner. Because there's no point in me banging on about the things that you don't want to know at the moment. And an always popular request, believe it or not, is GST. And with 1 July, the new financial year approaching, it is a very common time for people to dive in and register for GST, our goods and services tax here in Australia. Now, you might have naturally reached the registration threshold of $75,000 in revenue, or you're not quite there and have decided 1 July is a good time to get registered anyway. I won't go into the nitty-gritty of what GST is. You can dive back to one of my very early episodes covering GST, but the basic concept is it's a 10% tax on relevant goods and services provided here and used here in Australia. So we'll go through today's episode with you knowing what GST is, and you are either required to register or you have decided to register. There are many moving parts when you are registered you need to take care of, and one of those parts is calculating and charging 10% GST on your sales if what you're providing has to have GST, as there are some exempt items, and we'll presume what you sell needs to have GST because this episode is all about pricing with GST. And that is, we're talking strategies to reprice your goods or services, how much you sell them for, and now you have or you're about to register for GST. Let's take it step by step and keep it simple. I like to make all things numbers easy for you. The first question to ask yourself is, did you already incorporate 10% taxes into your selling price when you set the current pricing you have? Maybe with the thought in mind you would be registering soon and didn't want to hassle your clients with changing or increasing prices in the very near future. As this is a good strategy when you're starting out and when you are reviewing your pricing, being close to needing to do the GST thing. So you might have already had that 10% in mind and included it in your prices. If you did, go you. You are super proactive and you can totally skip the middle section of this episode, although it won't hurt to listen though now that you're already here. If you didn't include 10% taxes in your pricing, and you're registering for the GST, the next step is to decide, A, do you absorb the GST, as in don't increase your prices and 10% is taken out and sent to the ATO, which you might do if you've recently significantly increased your prices already. Or B, do you pop a flat 10% price increase on top of your prices, which is the GST amount? Or C, do a holistic review of all your costs, profit, and then add 10% on to come to your new selling price. While they're all viable options, you need to work out which one aligns best with you and your business. Because option A, absorbing the prices, is a bit of a stretch for me, and I don't recommend it, as you're losing 10% out of your profit, which in some cases turns sales into a loss if you haven't done that pricing calculations right. So do a deep dive on your prices, and if you've recently increased them and your costs are covered and you're still making the profit you planned for, you might be able to get away with absorbing the 10%. But keep in mind, most people underprice or undervalue what they're doing or selling. And like I said, you might not be making any profit if you don't have enough buffer in there. Option B, again, it's another viable option which covers the GST, so you're not out of pocket, so to speak. But unless you have recently reviewed your pricing, chances are it's time for a price review. Because don't forget, costs have gone up on everything lately. And again, the last one, option C, is my favorite. A full review of your current costs, then adding on the profit, and then adding on tax to land at your perfect price. C is my favorite because it allows you to take a step back, recheck your current costs, make sure the profit is there, and then taxes are added on. It's not an afterthought because prices should never be a set and forget. Your costs are always changing. You should regularly review your pricing. We're not talking pricing for profit here or how to calculate your prices. We're talking about strategies and options for repricing. Now you have to consider GST. I have a few episodes looking at working out your sell price, pricing for profit, and profit strategies that you can dive back and take a listen to. Pricing is key to a lot of things you do in your small business, so it's woven through a few episodes actually. While you're reviewing your costs, it can sometimes be a perfect opportunity to check in and renegotiate with suppliers where you can. Not always, but something to keep in mind when you're working through your costs for sure. Back to repricing strategies. We've looked at whether you have already incorporated the 10% or no. We need to revisit our pricing and 3 different ways to do that. Now you've landed on your new prices, however that looks for you, remembering not to compare yourself to others. The next step in this strategic process is to communicate with your customers or clients with clarity and transparency. If you have ongoing clients, this step is very important because you want to nurture your relationship. Put together the new pricing and any new value or inclusions you've put in and let them know that this new price now includes GST because you are now registered. If they're also registered, the GST portion won't be too much of an issue because they can claim it back themselves when they do their BAS. But if they themselves are not also registered for GST, it could be a significant price rise to them as they don't get to claim any GST back. So make sure you give plenty of notice. If you don't so much have regular ongoing clients, but a retail client base, for example, you could email them letting them know of an upcoming price change by way of a promotion, encouraging them to buy now before prices do go up. And another helpful way is bundling products together to create more value with the higher price points. There are loads of different ways to reprice and let your clients know, and most will depend on your industry. We could literally spend hours on this step in the strategy alone, but be clear in how you communicate it, upfront and transparent. Be ready to answer any questions that come your way because not everyone may be aware of why this is happening, particularly if they're new to running their own business. I've helped customers implement what's called staged pricing, where if you find your new price is quite a substantial increase, you can increase it instead in stages, if that works for you and your business process. You have to make sure that is communicated very clearly so it's not a few price increases that they didn't realize were coming. Okay, you've got your new prices and you've communicated them. It's time to update your systems. And by that, I mean the systems that sell and invoice your clients. If you have a sales platform like Shopify, update your sell prices and make sure it's either adding GST on top or including it in the price that you've put, making sure that's what you've worked out. Do a test sale to yourself to check that it generates the amount you're looking for. And make sure it's accurately showing those taxes to your clients and it's calculating on all the items. We see at least a handful of invoices every week where our clients have received invoices and their supplier isn't charging GST on the freight portion. They forget to turn taxes on the shipping, which is normally in a separate settings area of your systems, so don't miss updating that. You might be wondering here, do I need to show my prices including or excluding GST and add tax on at the end? And the ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, have this one set out crystal clear for you. If you only sell business to business, B2B, you can show your exclusive prices on your websites or your quotes and say plus GST. But if you sell business to consumer, B2C, you must show the final inclusive price. So if you sell to a mix of businesses and end users, the retail consumers, you need to show your prices including GST. If you use a project management system like Dubsado or projects and quoting through your accounting software like Xero, you'll need to update your tax and invoice settings there as well. Now, if you're DIYing, it's probably a good time to get a bookkeeper on board to help you out with all of this, or at least have your bookkeeper or a tax agent cast their eye over things for you to make sure you've got your settings right so you don't over or undercharge. Again, generate some test invoices to make sure it is spot on. You can check out my podcast episode, Do Your Tax Invoices Say the Right Things, as there are some very specific requirements with information that you need to have on there. Now pause and check in here on your business legals, your website T's and C's, your client agreements. Do they need updating now if you had any reference to pricing and taxes in your legals? Another important area to mention here, while you're reviewing everything and changing all your settings, if you sell overseas, you can set most sales platforms to automatically not charge them taxes based on their location because you're not required to charge when the goods or services are sold and used overseas. The last step in these repricing strategies and steps is, as I've touched on, is to not set and forget. Set a reminder to regularly review your prices. Make sure they're still profitable and what you want to charge. Congratulations on registering for GST though. It is definitely a milestone achievement in your business. With this comes new responsibilities and admin to do. If you're not already using accounting software, I would say now is the time to dive in. The benefits and time saving alone outweighs any software costs because you not only have to track your GST on income, you have to track it on your expenses. Now, this last step I want to mention, you would be surprised, is actually missed from time to time when people are DIYing their books. So it's definitely worth a mention. You actually have to physically register with the ATO. You can't simply decide and say it is so. There's a registration process and your trusty bookkeeper or tax agent will be at the ready to support you on this. I hope you now have loads of clarity and confidence to reprice and know you're covering your GST and still making a profit. Make sure you head back and check out my episode that I've mentioned, Profit Strategies, How to Manage Your Money Right, which steps you through a few ways to make sure you look after that profit and squirrel the GST portion away safely to a savings account so you don't find yourself in Bass Struggle Street when it comes time to lodge the Bass and hand the money over to the ATO. Don't forget, all these strategies and suggestions are general in nature and don't take into account your individual circumstances. So make sure you check in with your professional for advice and support tailored to you and your business. Now, if you are stressing out about working out your new prices, thinking you're no good at maths, I have a simple calculator to help you tweak those prices. Grab my free pricing calculator, accountedforyou.com.au/pricing calc to get those prices spot on. That's it on my strategies for repricing to make sure you're looking after your GST. I look forward to catching up with you next week. If you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss the new episodes. Thanks for popping me in your ears, and I will chat to you next week.